The Kaltharian Academy of Combat Sciences perched on Nexus Prime like a metallic tumor, sprawling across 17 levels of the station with all the aesthetic charm of a bureaucratic fever dream. Here, in the galaxy's most prestigious military training facility, the finest warriors from 47 species gathered to learn the ancient art of systematically dismantling each other. The Academy's motto, carved in 12 languages across the main entrance, proclaimed excellence through superior force, which roughly translated to "we teach beings how to hurt other beings very efficiently, and we're insufferably proud of it." The institution operated on a simple principle. Species ranked by their perceived military prowess got the best instructors, the choicest assignments, and the luxury of looking down their various nasal appendages at everyone else. Kaltharians, with their 7-foot frames and exoskeletons that could deflect small arms fire, naturally occupied the top tier. Humans, being recent additions to the galactic community and lacking any obvious biological advantages like poison sacs or retractable claws, found themselves relegated somewhere between the pacifist Zelnorians and the mathematically obsessed Quinth in terms of respect. This hierarchy wasn't merely academic snobbery, it was institutionalized arrogance with a curriculum. Instructor Mordaine embodied everything wrong with this system, which was saying something considering the competition. Standing 8 feet tall with chitinous plates that gleamed like polished obsidian, he possessed the kind of confidence that came from never having been punched in what passed for his face. His teaching methodology relied heavily on public humiliation, particularly of species he considered inferior, which included everyone who wasn't Kaltharian and several who were. Mordaine's advanced combat theory class had become legendary for all the wrong reasons. Students attended not to learn, but to watch him select some unfortunate cadet for a practical demonstration that invariably ended with said cadet sprawled across the training mat, dignity in tatters. The betting pools among students had grown so sophisticated that they now included odds on which limb would be injured and how many times the victim would hit the deck. Today's victim sat in the third row, apparently oblivious to the predatory attention focused on her. Zara Kowalski looked like someone had ordered a human warrior from a discount catalog. Average height, unremarkable build. Brown hair pulled into a functional ponytail that suggested she cut it herself with whatever sharp object was handy. Her academy uniform hung on her frame like a hand-me-down, and she had the peculiar ability to blend into backgrounds despite being the only human in a room full of aliens who considered her species barely above bacteria in terms of evolutionary achievement. What made Zara particularly appetizing to Mordaine wasn't her species, though that certainly helped, but her absolute refusal to engage with his provocations. While other cadets flinched when he stalked past, she displayed the emotional response of furniture. When he made pointed comments about human fragility, she nodded along as if he were discussing weather patterns. This kind of unflappable demeanor was either impressive confidence or spectacular stupidity, and Mordaine was betting heavily on the latter. The other students had noticed the tension building like static before a storm. Crixtal, a Vorthan whose species evolved from ambush predators, whispered to his seat partner that humans possessed some kind of death wish. The Zenthari twins, whose forearms made them naturally gifted at simultaneous note-taking and gossip, had already started a betting pool on how quickly their human classmate would fold. Even Jexnon, whose species was so peaceful they apologized to furniture when they bumped into it, watched with the kind of morbid fascination usually reserved for traffic accidents. The advanced combat facility resembled a gladiatorial arena designed by committee, circular, sterile, and equipped with medical stations that suggested the architects expected regular casualties. Force fields separated the training area from observation decks, where students could watch their peers get systematically dismantled while enjoying refreshments from vending machines that accepted 17 different currencies. The irony of selling snacks while watching someone get pummeled was apparently lost on academy administrators, though it perfectly captured the institution's approach to education. Mordaine entered the arena with the theatrical flair of someone who genuinely believed he was the main character in everyone else's story. His chitinous plates caught the artificial lighting, creating dramatic shadows that he'd probably practiced in mirrors. He carried himself with the loose-limbed confidence of a predator who had never encountered effective prey, his movements suggesting that violence was not just his profession, but his art form. "Today," he announced, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from never being contradicted, "we'll examine the practical applications of superior physiology in combat scenarios." His multifaceted eyes swept the assembled students like searchlights before settling on Zara with the satisfaction of a hunter spotting wounded prey. "You, human, join me." The silence that followed could have been bottled and sold as awkwardness concentrate. 63 students held their collective breath while Zara calmly closed a datapad, stood up with the unhurried grace of someone heading to lunch rather than potential hospitalization, and walked down to the training area. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet, each step seemingly driving home the impossibility of a situation. Other instructors might have felt some flicker of conscience about the obvious mismatch, but Mordaine had successfully suppressed his conscience years ago in favor of ego maintenance. He watched his chosen victim approach with the satisfaction of a chef preparing a particularly fine meal. Humans, in his extensive experience, provided excellent demonstrations of why some species deserved their place at the bottom of the galactic food chain. "Class," Mordaine continued, beginning to pace around Zara like a predator circling prey. "Observe the physiological disadvantages inherent in this species. Inferior bone density, limited reach, no natural weapons, soft tissue vulnerable to impact." He gestured at Zara as if she were a particularly interesting museum exhibit. Their military victories against other human factions may seem impressive to primitive observers, but against species with actual evolutionary advantages, they become quite manageable. The Zenthri twins had their note-taking hands busy while their betting hands worked datapads, updating odds in real time. Crixtal leaned forward with the kind of attention usually reserved for particularly gruesome accidents. Even the instructor's assistants, normally busy with paperwork, had stopped to watch what promised to be a thoroughly one-sided encounter. Zara, meanwhile, had begun what appeared to be casual stretching exercises. She rolled her shoulders, flexed her fingers, and performed a series of movements that looked more like yoga than combat preparation. To the assembled aliens, this appeared to be either a very strange pre-defeat ritual or evidence that humans dealt with stress by becoming even more peculiar than usual. What they couldn't see, because they weren't looking for it, were the subtle signs that Zara was systematically checking every muscle group, testing her range of motion, and evaluating the arena's dimensions with the kind of professional attention most people reserved for tax preparation. Her seemingly casual glances were actually mapping exit points, identifying potential weapons among the training equipment, and cataloging the positions of every observer who might interfere. Mordaine, interpreting her calm demeanor as either bravery or stupidity, and strongly leaning toward the latter, decided to add some psychological pressure to his physical advantages. "I've made extensive studies of your species' combat capabilities," he announced, circling her with the slow deliberation of a shark who'd found something interesting in the water. "Your military history consists primarily of using superior numbers and primitive weapons against equally primitive opponents. When faced with genuine physical superiority, humans typically resort to running away or surrendering." The insult hung in the air like bad ventilation, while Zara finished her stretches with the same methodical precision she'd shown throughout. If Mordaine's words bothered her, she showed it about as clearly as furniture would. This lack of reaction seemed to irritate him more than tears or protests would have. Nothing frustrated a bully quite like prey that refused to act properly afraid. "Perhaps," Mordaine continued, his voice taking on the edge that preceded his more spectacular humiliations, "you'd prefer to concede now? Save yourself the medical expenses." Zara straightened up from her final stretch and looked at him with the kind of mild interest someone might show when asked about weekend plans. "I'm good, thanks." The casual dismissal hit Mordaine like a physical blow. Students shifted nervously, recognizing the dangerous territory they were entering. When Kaltharian instructors got their egos bruised, the resulting explosions tended to require emergency medical response teams and significant paperwork. "Very well," Mordaine said, his voice dropping to the register that made smart students duck for cover. "We'll proceed with the demonstration. Standard Academy rules. The exercise concludes when one participant yields or becomes unable to continue. Medical personnel are standing by." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "I do hope you have adequate insurance coverage." The betting pools reached fever pitch as students frantically adjusted their wages. The Zenthri twins were offering odds on whether the human would last 30 seconds or require immediate surgical intervention. Crixtal had started recording, anticipating viral potential for what promised to be a spectacular mismatch. Even the medical team perked up, already mentally preparing for what they assumed would be straightforward human injury treatment. What happened next would require several official investigations, 3 separate medical reviews, and a complete overhaul of the Academy's policies regarding instructor-student combat demonstrations. Mordaine moved first, launching himself forward with a kind of explosive speed that had made Kaltharians the galaxy's premier warriors. His approach was textbook perfect, using his superior reach and mass to overwhelm an opponent before they could establish defensive positioning. 8 feet of armored warrior moving at combat speed should have ended the fight before it properly began. Zara moved like water. She slipped Mordaine's initial strike with an economy of movement that made it look effortless, her body flowing around his extended arm while maintaining perfect balance. His follow-up swing, thrown with enough force to dent steel plating, connected with empty air as she ghost-stepped backward with timing so precise it looked choreographed. To the observers, this appeared to confirm their expectations. The human was running away, just as Mordaine had predicted. Crixtal actually chuckled, anticipating the inevitable moment when superior reach and speed would corner the retreating prey. What they didn't recognize was that Zara wasn't retreating. She was gathering data. Each of Mordaine's attacks provided information about his timing, his reach, his recovery speed, and his preferred combinations. While he demonstrated his superior physical capabilities, she was systematically cataloging his weaknesses with the methodical precision of a scientist studying an interesting specimen. Mordaine, interpreting her defensive movement as the beginning of inevitable surrender, began to showboat. His attacks became more elaborate, designed to demonstrate his superiority rather than end the fight efficiently. He threw combinations that looked impressive but created unnecessary openings, pausing between strikes to ensure the audience appreciated his technique. "Observe," he called out between attacks, "how inferior physiology forces defensive tactics. The human cannot engage directly because she lacks the natural weapons to." Zara interrupted his lecture by stepping inside his guard and delivering a straight punch to his solar plexus that cut off his commentary mid-sentence. The sound was distinctive, part impact, part deflation, and entirely unexpected. Mordaine's chitinous plates, designed to deflect edged weapons and energy blasts, proved remarkably ineffective against concentrated kinetic force delivered at close range to an unarmored joint. His confident expression shifted to something resembling surprise, followed quickly by what humans would recognize as the universal look of someone who just realized they'd made a terrible mistake. The silence in the observation area was profound. 63 students stared in collective shock while their worldview underwent rapid unscheduled reconstruction. The betting pools crashed as probability calculations revealed their fundamental flaws. Even the medical team paused in their preparations, suddenly uncertain about which patient would require their services. Mordaine recovered with a kind of desperate speed that indicated his ego had been damaged along with his breathing. He launched a vicious backhand that should have sent any human across the arena, possibly in several pieces. Zara ducked under the swing, stepped forward, and drove her elbow into his knee joint with surgical precision. The joint folded with a wet cracking sound that made several students queasy. Mordaine's confident advance became an uncontrolled stumble, as his left leg decided it no longer wanted to support his weight. His expression suggested he was beginning to suspect that this wasn't going according to plan. What followed was less a fight than a systematic deconstruction of everything the Academy believed about species hierarchy and combat effectiveness. Zara moved like violence given human form, each strike calculated to maximize damage while minimizing her own exposure. She targeted joints, nerve clusters, and structural weak points with a kind of anatomical knowledge that suggested she'd made detailed studies of Kaltharian physiology. Mordaine's superior reach became irrelevant when she stayed inside his guard. His armored plates provided no protection against strikes delivered to unprotected gaps. His greater mass worked against him as she used leverage and momentum to send him stumbling into arena walls that hadn't been designed to absorb impacts from falling instructors. The crowd watched in stunned fascination as their understanding of reality underwent complete renovation. The human wasn't just holding her own. She was systematically dismantling a trained Kaltharian warrior with the casual efficiency of someone performing routine maintenance. Mordaine's attacks became increasingly desperate as he realized he was in serious trouble. His technique deteriorated into wild swings and lunges that left him off balance and exposed. Sweat began to darken his uniform despite the arena's climate control, and his breathing took on the labored quality of someone who'd discovered they were in significantly worse shape than they'd assumed. Zara, meanwhile, showed no signs of fatigue. If anything, she seemed to be warming up. Her movements remained precise and economical, each strike serving multiple purposes: damage, positioning, and psychological impact. She was conducting a masterclass in applied violence while simultaneously destroying decades of accepted wisdom about human combat capabilities. The end came with mathematical inevitability. Mordaine, his left leg barely functional and his confidence completely shattered, attempted one final desperate gambit. He gathered himself for a massive overhead strike that would either end the fight decisively or leave him completely exposed to counterattack. Given his track record for the past several minutes, smart money was on the latter. Zara sidestepped the telegraphed attack with contemptuous ease, caught his extended arm, and used his own momentum to send him face-first into the arena floor with enough force to crack the reinforced materials. The impact was spectacular. Mordaine hit the deck like a meteor, his skull striking with a sound that would haunt the nightmares of everyone present. The force was sufficient to fracture his cranial plates, a feat that shouldn't have been possible given their evolutionary purpose as natural armor. Medical alarms began shrieking as automated systems detected critical injuries. The emergency response team rushed onto the arena floor, while Zara stepped back with the calm demeanor of someone who'd just completed a routine task. She wasn't even breathing heavily. Mordaine lay motionless while medics worked frantically to stabilize him. His skull showed visible fracture lines, and diagnostic scanners revealed internal damage that would require extensive surgery to repair. The being who'd entered the arena as the galaxy's premier example of evolved warrior superiority was now a medical emergency requiring immediate evacuation. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, then progressed to painful, and finally achieved the kind of profound quiet that suggested reality itself was reconsidering its basic assumptions. Students stared at the scene with expressions ranging from shock to existential crisis. Several of the younger cadets appeared to be questioning everything they'd been taught about species hierarchy and combat effectiveness. Academy officials materialized with the supernatural speed of bureaucrats detecting career-threatening situations. They swarmed the arena like antibodies responding to infection, implementing damage control protocols while simultaneously trying to understand what had just happened. Dean Horthak, a Kaltharian administrator whose career had been built on the foundation of his species' natural superiority, watched the medical team load Mordaine onto a gravitational stretcher with the expression of someone watching their worldview undergo catastrophic failure. The implications extended far beyond one instructor's medical emergency. They struck at the core assumptions underlying the entire academy structure. The investigation that followed was thorough, exhaustive, and ultimately pointless. Security recordings confirmed that Zara had acted within established academy protocols. Medical examinations revealed no evidence of performance-enhancing substances or illegal modifications. Combat analysis showed that her techniques, while devastatingly effective, utilized no prohibited methods or equipment. The uncomfortable truth was that a human cadet had systematically dismantled a Kaltharian instructor using nothing more than skill, training, and what appeared to be extensive knowledge of alien anatomy. This wasn't supposed to be possible according to everything the galactic community believed about species capabilities. Mordaine's recovery took 6 months and required 3 separate surgical procedures to repair his fractured skull. The damage to his reputation proved significantly more difficult to address. News of the incident spread through the galactic communication networks with a kind of viral enthusiasm usually reserved for celebrity scandals or political disasters. A Kaltharian combat instructor being hospitalized by a human cadet became the subject of countless discussion forums, comedic programs, and academic papers analyzing the implications. The Academy's response was predictably bureaucratic. They instituted new safety protocols for instructor-student demonstrations, revised their species capability assessments, and quietly began recruiting human instructors to their staff. The betting pools evolved to include humans as serious contenders rather than amusing underdogs, and enrollment applications from human military academies increased by 300%. Zara herself became something of a celebrity, though she handled fame with the same unflappable demeanor she'd shown everything else. She finished her academy training with top marks, received offers from military organizations across the galaxy, and eventually accepted a position as a combat instructor at the same institution where she'd first demonstrated that assumptions about human capabilities might require significant adjustment. Her first lecture as an instructor began with a simple observation that would become legendary among Academy students. Combat effectiveness isn't determined by the size of your natural weapons or the thickness of your armor. It's determined by how well you understand the relationship between force, leverage, and anatomy. Today, we're going to discuss why assuming your opponent is inferior might be the last mistake you ever make. The class hung on every word while Zara began her systematic deconstruction of traditional combat theory. In the back row, a young Kaltharian cadet raised his hand with obvious nervousness. "Instructor," he asked, "what's the most important thing to remember when facing a human opponent?" Zara considered the question with the same methodical approach she applied to everything else. "Don't." The laughter that followed carried just enough edge to suggest that humor and warning weren't mutually exclusive concepts. Meanwhile, in a medical facility 3 sectors away, former instructor Mordaine was beginning his rehabilitation therapy. His skull had healed, but his ego remained in critical condition. He'd requested a transfer to administrative duties, citing a sudden interest in paperwork and a corresponding decrease in enthusiasm for hands-on instruction. His therapy notes included an interesting observation from the medical staff. He developed an involuntary flinch response whenever humans appeared in his peripheral vision. The condition wasn't considered serious enough for treatment, but it served as a permanent reminder that sometimes the galaxy's most dangerous predators came in surprisingly unremarkable packages. The Academy's motto remained carved in 12 languages across the main entrance, but students had begun adding unofficial translations in the margins. The most popular version read, "Excellence through superior force, terms and conditions apply. Results may vary. Not all species are created equal. Humans void where prohibited." It wasn't quite as inspiring as the original, but it had the advantage of being significantly more accurate. And somewhere in the Academy's archives, filed under incidents requiring policy review, sat a medical report detailing how assumptions about species superiority could result in catastrophic skull fractures and careers that ended with whimpering sounds. It served as required reading for new instructors, along with a detailed analysis of why underestimating humans had become the galaxy's newest professional hazard. The report's final recommendation was elegantly simple. When in doubt, assume the quiet human in the back row knows exactly how to break things that weren't supposed to be breakable. This assumption had proven remarkably effective at preventing additional medical emergencies and ego-related injuries among faculty members. After all, the galaxy was a dangerous place, and the most dangerous predators often looked exactly like prey right up until the moment they introduced you to concepts like kinetic energy distribution and anatomical leverage points. Some lessons, it seemed, required broken skulls to fully appreciate.